I don't think wine should be pretentious or snobby. Wine should be fun. And what could be more fun than rocking up to a party with a 12-litre bottle of champagne? In this video, I'm going to cover all of the common wine bottle sizes, big and small, and some of the less common ones as well. So let's get to it. We'll start things small and boring and work our way up to the big stuff. This is a piccolo or a split or a quarter bottle. This particular bottle measures 200 milliliters, which is the most common around these parts, though a true quarter bottle would actually be 187 milliliters, which are also fairly common. You'll most often see small bottles like these in someone's fridge as individual servings, though they're also pretty popular at pubs and restaurants as an alternative to wines by the glass. Why would a restaurant open a bottle of sparkling wine, pour one glass and have it go off when nobody else orders it, when they could simply just sell a smaller bottle for a similar price? One step up, we have the incredibly boring half bottle, or demi. It measures 375 milliliters, which is exactly one half of a standard bottle. You don't see many of these around anymore, and I've never put one on any wine list I've written. There are some advantages, but I don't think any make a super compelling case as to why you'd buy a half bottle. They are most commonly seen in dessert wines, where they come in all sorts of wacky shapes like this. Since dessert wines are higher in alcohol than table wine, it does make sense here to have a smaller bottle. For other types of wine, in Australia at least, you see these mostly on wine lists at very fancy restaurants for very high prices. The reasoning I've most often heard is that people might not be willing to pay, say, $300 for a bottle of wine, but they might be willing to pay $170 or so for a half bottle. I don't really accept that as an argument, as if you have $170 to spend on a half a bottle of wine, you can probably afford a full bottle. Where they also make some sense to me is at the lower end, like if you're going out to dinner by yourself and you don't think you can get through a full bottle, that makes sense there. Or if you're going out with someone else and you can't agree on what you'd like, you can simply have a half a bottle each. That to me is the most common sense use case, though I can absolutely drink a full bottle of wine by myself, so I've never ordered a half. The biggest problem with a demi is that the price doesn't scale very well. A half bottle almost always costs more than half of a regular bottle because they're a much lower volume production. That said, in wholesale price lists, there are still plenty of half bottles to choose from at all price levels. Another compelling case, from a restaurant's point of view at least, is that wine in a smaller bottle ages much faster than wine in a standard bottle. This is due to how much air gets into the bottle relative to the amount of wine in the bottle. So if you have a nice red, like a Nebbiolo for instance, which in a full bottle might need 8 or 10 years to reach its peak, you can store for 2 or 3 in a half bottle and get a similar result. This cuts down on cellaring costs and means your customers can enjoy a great aged wine sooner. This also does have the drawback though that expensive half bottles will peak earlier than normal bottles, so for a personal cellar you're going to have to remember to drink it earlier. It's also a problem with wines that are best enjoyed when young, as they will spoil more quickly in a half bottle. On the next rung of the ladder is the standard wine bottle, 750 milliliters. It's the standard the world over and is therefore very, very boring, and I'm going to spend no more time talking about it. Up next we have the Magnum. The Magnum is the first of the large format bottles, and it's 1.5 liters in size, exactly twice the size of this here standard bottle. You bring a Magnum to a party and you're going to be very popular, and if you've got a decent sized group of people, 5 or 6, then a Magnum would really be the minimum size I would consider. Magnums have the advantage of being fairly common, and all sorts of table wine from cheap Moscato to top of the line reds will be available in a Magnum format, which means it doesn't have to break the bank. Depending on the wine, price can scale fairly linearly, though it is a lot more glass to manufacture and smaller wineries will have to hand fill a Magnum, so you might end up paying a small premium. A reason people do pay the premium for Magnums and other large format bottles is for the aging effect. Remember a few minutes ago when I said that half bottles age faster than standard bottles? Well, Magnums age slower, which means they last a lot longer. So if you want to resell a bottle of wine in 20, 30 years or more, or pass a bottle through the generations, then a magnum is going to last a lot longer than a standard bottle. You see this if you're trying to buy older vintage wine. A magnum is going to command a huge price premium on older wine, as there is a much higher chance that the wine is still drinkable than if it was in a standard bottle. And next up, we have my personal favorite, a Jeroboam. It measures 3 liters of wine. It's very impressive. Now, to be really safe, a 3-liter bottle should actually probably be called a double magnum, as in some areas of France, a Jeroboam is actually a 4.5-liter bottle of wine. However, in Champagne and the rest of the world, a 3-liter bottle is called a Jeroboam, and a 4.5-liter bottle is called a Rehoboam. Not that you'll ever see one. Jeroboams are really the last bottle size you'll find that makes any sense to just go out and buy and take to a party. Quite a lot of mass-produced wines are available in Jeroboam format, and while there is a price premium, you're going to be able to find them quite easily. Rosé, particularly from Provence, is a style that's readily available here quite cheaply in Jeroboam format, and if you're aging wines for decades, then a Jeroboam is much more likely to appreciate in value over a standard bottle or a magnum. Apart from the slower aging, larger bottles have thicker glass, which means more insulation, which means the wine is less likely to get damaged from heat or fluctuations in temperature. And Jeroboam is the last format that I'd describe as common, and the first bottle to be named after a biblical king, which will become a theme later on. Above the Jeroboam, there's a couple of non-standard sizes. There's the 4.5-liter bottle I mentioned earlier, also called a Jeroboam in some parts of France, or called a Rehoboam in normal places. These aren't common here in Australia, but I think I've seen 1 or 2 on price lists at some point. The Mackenzie is another size. It's a 5-liter bottle, and I've never seen one, either in person or on a price list. Okay, so interjecting from very far in the future, and I now have a very large collection of large format wine bottles, including this Mackenzie of Sauvignon Blanc. The Mackenzie is quite an interesting format, as in the US, it can also be called a Rehoboam or even a Jeroboam, as in the US. For very large format bottles, they legally have to be in whole liter amounts, which means it's illegal to have a 4.5-liter bottle, so it has to be rounded up to 5 liters. The Mackenzie is also very interesting because out of all of the very large format bottles, it is not divisible by a whole bottle. A Mackenzie contains 6.666 recurring bottles of wine. So very interesting format, and next on my to drink list. Then it's back to the standard bottle sizes, starting at the whopping 6-liter Methuselah. I've already finished this one and it left me wanting. A Methuselah holds the equivalent of 4 magnums or 8 standard bottles, or that's 40 decent sized glasses. And surprise interjection again. A Methuselah is technically the name of a bottle with sloping sides like a Champagne or a Burgundy bottle, whereas if it's a bottle with straight sides like a Bordeaux bottle, then it's called an Imperial. There is a great sense of fun that comes with opening a Methuselah. This is where wine becomes an occasion. And I'd argue that the wine that's in the bottle is secondary to the experience of the bottle itself at this point. That said, you can buy Methuselahs for most collectible wines, usually when the vintage first launches. You might need to know someone at the winery or the distributor to get your hands on one, but it is very doable. Now, as you might know, in champagne production, the fermentation generally has to take place in the bottle, which leads to magnums and Jeroboams of champagne being more complex in flavor than a standard bottle, as it takes longer for the fermentation to occur. However, once you get to a Methuselah, this is no longer a requirement, so the bigger bottles are usually filled from smaller bottles, I think. They don't quote me exactly how they're made. I have asked, no one's responded. But at this point for champagne, the bottle becomes an awesome novelty and ceases to improve the flavor in any meaningful way, though the slower aging benefits still stay the same. The Methuselah is, I think, the largest format that is practical for either buying, storing, or drinking for yourself personally, and even then you're going to be lucky to find a fridge that fits one. The Methuselah is also the largest wine bottle that I can pour directly into a champagne flute without assistance. And at 9 litres, we have the Salmanazar, which I unfortunately don't have on me at the moment. This is where bottles start to become hopelessly impractical for any kind of personal use, but is still an exceptional novelty, which means it's ideal for champagne celebrations, and most champagne houses do make Salmanazars. Since I don't have a Salmanazar on me, we shall step up to the Balthazar, if I can lift it. Oh, it won't fit, it's going to hit the glass rack. Oh. And I'm going to need a wider angle lens. There we go. That is freakishly big. The second from the largest of the standard size, and this is my personal bottle of champagne, which I'll be opening on New Year's Eve, a Balthazar holds a whopping 12 litres of wine. That is 16 normal bottles, or over 80 glasses of wine, the way I pour wine. Now, usually the price premiums on these are fairly insane, and the reason I'm using Champagne Pol Roger, aside from it being an excellent champagne, is because the price scales somewhat reasonably for their very large format bottles. And no, I can't fit it into my fridge. Yes, it will probably be flat by the time I get to the bottom of it, and I am extremely unlikely to be able to pour this without like 2 other people assisting me or a cradle, but it's fucking cool. Now I don't have one on me, so I'm going to try and do this digitally. A Nebuchadnezzar is 15 litres, equivalent to 20 standard bottles of wine. A Nebuchadnezzar is likely the largest bottle of champagne you are going to be able to buy as someone who is not a multi-millionaire. Nebuchadnezzars can be had for a few $1,000s. Again, Pol Roger is probably the best valuable option here, but the price difference between the 12 litre Balthazar and the 15 litre Nebuchadnezzar was over $1,000 Australian, hence why I have the tiny Balthazar instead. But if you're a good saver, a Nebuchadnezzar isn't outside the realm of possibility, but they're not something a normal person is going to be buying very often. That said, most champagne houses do bottle Nebuchadnezzars, as do plenty of red wine producers, so you have choice, which is more than can be said for the next sizes up. At 18 litres, there is the Melchior or Solomon. I've never seen one, and I'm not sure how common they are, but they pop up every now and then at auctions. Usually wineries bottle them as one-offs or in extremely limited production. A 27 litre bottle is called a Goliath or a Primat. I'm not sure if these are even in production at the moment, with the latest references I can find pointing to a Chilean winery that bottled just 2 of those in 2014. And finally you have the big one, the 30 litre bottle, equivalent to 2 Nebuchadnezzars, or 40 standard bottles of wine. It's called a Melchizedek or a Midas. And you probably have to be reasonably wealthy to even see one of these, as it's usually going to be a billionaire or fiscally irresponsible rapper that's buying it for all their mates at a nightclub. Only 2 wineries make 30 litre bottles. Armand de Brignac, who sell their champagne for about $100,000 per Midas, and Champagne Drapier, who sell theirs at a loss for less than $10,000. And they lose a sizable portion of the 25 or so they make every year due to them exploding. And another interjection, sorry, it's taken me about a year between filming and editing this video, so I did do more research on the really enormous bottle sizes, and I actually found quite a few Australian wineries that bottled in the 18 litre Melchior, and even one that bottled 27 litre Primats. And I was going to buy the Primat that I found before I realized that I could really do something special, because as far as I can tell, no Australian wineries have ever bottled a Melchizedek, the 30 litre bottle, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm working in conjunction with my favorite winery to get a Melchizedek of wine to me. The bottle is actually at the winery right now, and I would love to go down and help fill it, but as I'm filming this, we're in the midst of a pandemic and I'm not allowed to leave the house. but I will be making a video documenting its production, so subscribe just in case. Now, this is not a complete list of every wine bottle size ever, as there are plenty of unique variants depending on the region or the type of wine. I've seen 250ml bottles called Chopines, and in some parts of the world 1 litre bottles are really common. Like this bottle of Tokaj is 500ml, for instance. And you can buy wine in cans now at all different sizes. So there's really no hard and fast standard. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see me make more wine videos, please let me know, as I'm on the fence myself. Happy drinking.